Welcome and Happy New Year. It's late, it's February
Happy
already.
New Year to you too.
It's going by very fast. Today we have once again our expert guest, Alexander.G.Markovsky, who I think is someone who needs no introduction for those who've been following us. But if this is new to you, he's Senior Fellow at the London Center for Policy Research, a think tank that examines national security, energy, risk analysis, and other public policy issues. He's the author of the book Anatomy of a Bolshevik and also of Liberal Bolshevism. America did not defeat communism, she adopted it. Mr. Markovsky is the owner and CEO of Litvin Management Services, LLC, and he can be reached at Alexander.G.Markovsky@gmail.com. And I'll put that in the comments later after the show. Today, we're going to discuss this article right here from the American Thinker, Only Islam Can Defeat Radical Islam, which was published on January 30th. I thought it was a very interesting argument. Earlier, we talked with Mr. Markovsky about flooding tunnels in Israel, and sadly, the IDF didn't listen to his advice. And as far as I know, there are hundreds of tunnels still untouched, and they decided they had to run freshwater lines instead of seawater because they didn't want to damage the ecosystem, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all sort of fizzling out, which it wasn't the silver bullet that we thought it might be. But Mr. Markovsky is not only an engineer, he was trained in the former Soviet Union. As part of that, he had some military training, but also he was involved in the energy business, so he knows a lot about supply lines of oil, gas, and so forth, and pipelines especially. And he can talk a little bit about geopolitics, which, of course, when it comes to the Middle East, is very, very important. Now, even Israel is a petropower with its giant gas field. So this is a very interesting article, which says the Western world remains reluctant to acknowledge the ongoing threat posed by radical Islam. This conflict's battleground, which initially unfolded in Israel, runs through Europe and has now extended its reach to the United States. And I found this absolutely fascinating because at least since September 11th, 2001, people have been saying America fails to recognize the threat from radical Islam. But people say it, and yet nothing happens. He adds in the article, just as happened centuries ago, thanks to Europeans' fatal errors in allowing Muslim refugees to enter the continent, Islam has launched itself across Europe in an unrelenting wave of religious acclamation and territorial expansion. Entire areas of major European cities, including London, Paris, and Marseille, have been de facto annexed to the possession of Islam, and the sovereignty of the host states is no longer recognized in those sizable enclaves. And I might add, it sounds a lot like settler colonization, which is supposed to be a bad thing. He then quotes a Nazi newspaper. The Islamists adeptly imitate the strategies Nazis employed in their approach to participating in democratic elections. In 1928, Goebbels wrote in his newspaper, Der Angriff, quote, "We enter parliament to supply ourselves in the arsenal of democracy with its own weapons. If democracy is so stupid as to give us free tickets and per diem for blockade, its own affair. We come as the wolf bursts into the flock. So we come." And this, of course, reminded me of Lenin's famous saying, the capitalists will sell us the rope with which we will hang them. So this seems to be an old story. And with that said, I will just go to the main point. For all these reasons, the conclusion is, therefore, this monster must first of all be defeated ideologically by superior principles advanced by Islam itself. And I wanted to ask Mr. Markovsky if he could explain how on earth our Kafir infidel or at best dhimmi powers in the West going to be able to mobilize Islam to fight Islam? Take it away.
Well, my point is just look at the world nowadays. Islam encompassed probably 1.5 billion people on this world. And if we consider that, like many people do, that there is no moderate Islam, all Islam is radical, then what are you going to do? You can't really eliminate 1.5 million people. Therefore, what I'm saying, that first, I don't believe that all Muslims are radicals, because I work in the Middle East. I've done some work. I've met with Muslims, and I can testify that not all of them are radical, and some of them just capitalistic like we are. They want to have an open world when they've been treated equally with everybody else and be allowed to make money like everybody else. And they don't really care about infidels, as radicals stated. They just want to do business and be treated like everybody else, like normal people. Stating that, I can tell that Donald Trump really got that in mind, that not all Muslims are radical, that there are plenty of Muslims that like to live in peace and prosperity. And he really exploited this option with Saudi Arabia, and I would say been extremely successful in it. First, what I'm saying, Islam has to defeat this, can be defeated with superior principles advanced by Islam itself. And, well, it's not really a mission impossible. We have historical precedents. In 2014, Egyptian President El-Sisi removed Muslim Brotherhood from power, outlawed this organization in Egypt, jailed and executed thousands of its members because they threatened, the way he saw it, they threatened Egypt's existence. He also denounced Islamic extremism and called for religious leaders and scholars to revolutionize religion, and I quote him, and bring it in line with Western morality. So there was already a precedent here. But what really changed the environment is what Donald Trump did in 2017. His Abraham Accord stands as the most momentous peace treaty since the Treaty of Westphalia of 1648, I believe, that ended Europe's 30 Years' War. I would say that significance of that treaty is that they were not imposed by force of arm on defeated enemy. It was like a recognition of objective reality. What Trump told our Saudis and other Arabs, that, hey, Israel is there to stay. And Israel is not your enemies. Your enemy is Iran. And it is also enemy of Israel. So you guys have to get together against common enemy. And and having good relation with Israel is one way to peace and prosperity. And we have to admit that that Saudis accepted that notion. I believe Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, if I pronounce it correctly, responded positively to Donald Trump appeal. And if I remember a precise quote, he said that we will not spend the next 30 years of our lives dealing with those destructive ideas. He referred to terrorism. And we can see it right now, the fruits of that agreement. You know, despite that war against Palestinians, with Palestinians between Israel and Hamas, really no Arab country raised voice, did something, I would say, real, I said tangible against Israel. There were just certain pronouncements, but look, there is no oil embargo as it used. They use. They don't send weapons to Hamas, and actually, no Arab country is willing to accept refugees from Gaza. So it tells you a lot. It tells you a lot. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, that although Arab countries just, I would say, keep it quiet, there is a Biden administration that continue to be that dead horse of two-state solutions that Arabs killed in 1948. They still insist on two states. They still support Palestinians with all that crocodile tears about civilians' casualties. Although I said crocodile tears because the United States and Britain are well known for targeting civilians during the Second World War. Those who don't remember it, I can remind about 2 nuclear bombs that were dropped on Japan. They were dropped on civilians. I can remind you bombing Dresden. That was directly targeted civilians, and casualties were estimated a lot greater than what we see in Gaza. So they continue to support Palestinians right now and give them hope that perhaps Israel will not be able to finish them all, and they will even get rewarded with two-state solution. So it may take a while before we're gonna finish it. Maybe it will take another election in the United States, and it will take Donald Trump to finally materialize Abraham Accords fully.
Well, that's a good point. Let me ask you about that. You're talking about the American dimension, but the Palestinians also have support, I believe, from what I see, from the EU, which is the European Union, which has a lot of money, from China, from Russia, and from Iran. And certainly we know Iran is supplying weapons, maybe more than that. So realistically, if Biden and Iran are on the same page, what can the Abraham Accords do to help Israel?
Well, again, to implement Abraham Accords completely requires leadership from the United States. And you're absolutely correct. As long as United States, as Biden administration and European Union continue to provide assistance, what they call humanitarian assistance to Hamas, yeah, there is a good chance that war will keep going on. Trump really made a comprehensive approach to the issue. He tried to isolate Iran, first of all, and provide sufficient weapon to Israel. Until that happened again, yes, you're right that mess will keep going on. But the main point is still, the Palestinian issue is not on the front of Arab countries' agenda anymore, and that is already done. It cannot be reversed.
But to what extent has Iran replaced the Arab countries as patron for Hamas, Hezbollah, etc.?
Well, the terrorism has to be financed. So, and Iran is a major financier and supporter of terrorism. So you have to deal with the source. Even in the latest events, when the United States did attack some proxies, Iran proxies, they did not attack Iran. And even that attack was more propaganda than real military success, because it took them too long to do it. The terrorists been warned about the attacks, so they removed some of their assets. Well, they destroyed a few buildings, maybe few ammunition stocks, but really not real damage. The damage has to be huge. Then Iran would understand that whom they're dealing with. But that wouldn't do it.
But let me ask you a question about that. Isn't it pretty clear that Biden does not want any war with Iran? And that, in fact, Biden's whole strategy is to restrain Israel and to show that the United States is even-handed and not taking sides in this dispute. In other words, it's the opposite of Trump. And let me add another point. Until recently, Russia used to be kind of neutral and even-handed. But from my point of view, very unfortunately, now Russia seems to be siding with Iran and Hamas and has turned into a opponent, if not an enemy of Israel. Is there any way getting Russia back at least to being neutral? I mean, it seems to me everything is shifted, the so-called correlation of forces, where your ally is with your enemy, your former neutral countries are with your enemy, and your enemies are with your enemy. Your only friends now, paradoxically, appear to be the Sunni Arab states.
Well, we're talking to a great deal about the consequences of Russia-Ukrainian war. When you isolated Russia, Russia started looking for someone to help them. And they pushed Russia toward China and pushed Russia toward Iran. And now, and Israel I think, made an error in supporting Ukraine. After all, they probably forgot that Ukrainians killed million Jews and Soviets liberated Auschwitz. So in Moscow, it was taken with, they thought it was taken as an insult.
Well, how do you get around that? And it seems to me the situation now is very dangerous for Israel, because how does Israel find, say if Biden were to say tomorrow, I'm cutting off your weapons, how could Israel fight? In a way, Israel's been humiliated, first by the surprise attack, which they couldn't stop, and secondly, with the massacres and rapes, et cetera, and hostages, and secondly, by being shown to be totally dependent on the United States. They have no independence of action. So
Well,
what can be done about that? How can the
well,
Arab countries
Israel
help?
made itself dependent on the United States completely. Then there is another events in Israel that really affected its foreign policy. It's internal division. There is a saying. You have two Jews, you have three opinions. So Israelis can get together and even elect their government. It took them half a dozen elections before Netanyahu came to power, and now they're trying to overthrow him, just like they tried to do it here with Donald Trump. So Israelis have to get together, unite against common enemy, and dependence of the United States is simply an unforgivable error.
And do you see any way to get out of that? I mean,
Well,
could they buy arms from Russia? I don't think so. I mean,
no, they're not going to buy a weapon from Russia right now. Russian buying weapons from other countries to maintain their military capacity in the war with Ukraine. Well, actually, not with Ukraine, with NATO.
So, I mean, how does I'd like to know how the Abraham Accords can help Israel to get out of the situation she finds herself in at the moment. Is there any hope that using Arab countries to supply weapons, material, money, whatever is needed?
No, that would be too much. If Arab countries not going to go against the United States.
Although during the Crusades, I believe, actually, the Jews and the Arabs were together against the Christian Crusaders. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, the world is a strange place, and there were many alliances, and so some counterproductive, but that's a history. And today, we need someone who would stop that NATO war with Russia, and that consequently will affect the Middle East as well.
So do you think?
I think that Donald Trump could solve this problem, relatively quickly.
Well, there's another question. Do you think then, if it could be solved quickly, that in fact Biden and the Biden administration wants this war and wants to bleed Israel, that in fact it's a war of choice, as they say? And in my own suspicion, just from everything that's happened, is perhaps even Biden green-lighted the original attack to bloody Israel's nose and force them to accept the two-state solution. I mean, in other words, how can the Abraham Accords nations, the Arab nations who now are friendly to Israel, somehow counterbalance what Biden is doing? Is there any hope for that?
Well, I frankly don't see that. I frankly don't see that the Arab country will sit and wait for a change of leadership in the United States.
So you're saying
they're not going to take initiative.
You're saying the election is actually crucial for the fate of peace in the Middle East. If you want world peace, you have to vote against Biden. But what if our elections are no longer possible? If they're like old Soviet elections or puppet state elections, where in fact there's no way to remove the people in power because they're so compromised?
Well, that would be a very sad world, We will continue wars versus peace and prosperity.
So you actually see the stakes coming up in 2024 as very clear: peace and prosperity, or war
versus wars
and poverty.
That's absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct.
And that, in fact,
we have to reverse our policy. We have to separate Russia from China because it's a very powerful bloc. We have to diminish NATO aspirations, continue that expansion, eastward expansion, and establish peace in the Middle East. And look, situation is on one hand is tragic. On the other hand, Israel never had it that good. That he could continue long war and no Arab country will step in.
Okay, so the question is then, I don't want to see a long war myself, but you're saying it's sort of like the Vietnam conflict where, you know, the American military said, well, we won all the battles, but we lost the war in Washington. Well, here's a case again of a war that it's going to be won or lost, not on the battlefield in Israel or Gaza or wherever, or
But
the Ukraine war.
This was the history it teaches us something. There were plenty of wars that were won on the battlefield and lost at negotiation table. And Americans are pretty infamous for that. To lose war on a negotiation table.
But how can we ensure that the United States doesn't repeat history again and again and again and again? I mean, in other words, you're saying the only way forward for America is for Donald Trump to be reelected. Am I correct?
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
But if
there is no other leader here in the United States that can use all power of the United States, diplomatically, military, industrial, to move forward and enforce peace in the world. Because America in the last 30 years been, I would say, the arsonist of war. For 30 years, America has been in war.
But not always successful.
And losing every one of them, by the way.
Exactly. So you have to ask what's really going on. And then the second question is, and is there any way that these Islamic countries can help Donald Trump to be elected then? In other words,
no, I don't think so. It's American business. It's a business of American people, and if they choose to elect Donald Trump, and Donald Trump will somehow manage those elections that prevents all shenanigans that we had in previous elections, well, then we will have peace and prosperity.
Well, thank you. I just want to go into this election issue because it's a big if, because you grew up in the Soviet Union. I believe they had elections in the Soviet Union, but everyone knew who would win.
Right.
My question here is, they're going to put Trump in jail. They're taking away his business. They're having all these allegations. It's costing him millions of dollars. I mean, how on earth? And then he has even the Republicans against him. How on earth is he going to get an honest election where the votes are honestly counted and he can possibly win?
Well, I think that's another issue. It's a big issue. We can discuss it at some other point, because okay. I don't think we have time for all of it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
But you raise very important question. Actually, the crucial question. How? Yes, if everything that I just said previously is correct, and we need Donald Trump, the next question is, of course, can we have Donald Trump?
And I just wonder, you grew up in a totalitarian country. You wrote a book saying you think Bolshevism has come to America. Is there any way of displacing it here?
Well, I've always been saying that Marxism, I would say. Bolshevism just part of Marxism. That Marxism is an incurable disease. Everyone should get it to develop immunity. Marxism is very attractive theory, and I don't see, well, frankly, I see that Donald Trump may delay it, but I think socialism in America is inevitable.
Yeah, but
Probably by some events that we going through, we may say it's already here.
well, but there's cycles. I mean, people said that before Ronald Reagan and so forth. So, there are these cycles of history, and things can change. If the will is there and the mechanism is there to change them. But I realize you're not an election procedures expert, but your bottom line is all these foreign policy issues are in fact domestic issues in the United States. That, in other words, questions of war and peace are going to be decided in the election.
Yes, they will be decided in Washington. That's correct.
All right. Okay, so we'll stay tuned. I think this has been just fascinating. I wish we could talk more about how Islam is going to defeat Islamic fundamentalism, especially when you have Saudi Arabia, which was the source of it, which seems to be turning a corner and going in a different direction. But how this will play out in such a way that in the end, I mean, I always thought you could have peace in the Middle East. I didn't think it was impossible, but unfortunately, great powers like to play in that sandbox, So in 1948, you had the Soviet Union on the side of Israel, and you had Great Britain on the side of the Arabs. And then it switches around, and they never sort of let the region develop on its own. They play their games, and the pawns are the people of the Middle East, Jews and Arabs alike. And unfortunately, I see here a similar development because when you look, who is funding the Israeli opposition? Well, a lot of it's coming from the American embassy and the EU. And if you look who's funding Hamas, it came from UNRWA, and it came from the EU, and it came from the United States and Iran. But it's like, it isn't all local people with local concerns.
Yeah, but it's we kind of move from the subject a little bit. Okay. Maybe we can talk about it, about those issues next time.
Okay. All right. So to sum up, if you could just sum up why the Abraham Accords are so revolutionary, the precedent of President El-Sisi in Egypt showing the way, and how you think President Trump can bring peace and prosperity if he's elected, just to sum up in a few words.
Well, to sum up, as I said, that one of the big issues of Abraham Accord is it kind of remove Palestinian issue from being central to peace in the Middle East. It removed the urgency, I would say, removed the urgency of Palestinian issue. And second, it shows Arab road to peace and prosperity, and they accepted it. That's what is very important. So I think it's united Arabs, to some extent, united Arabs in Israel against common enemy mullahs of Iran. That was great accomplishment.
All right.
Which press, United States world press and political pundits, grossly underestimate.
I hope that it's also going to have some secret weapon in this war that'll somehow perform some miracle to, have a happy ending to a very tragic situation. All
Okay,
right. With that, I want to thank you again.
thank
And
you.
I hope with your next article, I can interview you again. Mr. Markovsky writes for American Thinker, which has always got lots of interesting articles about what's happening now. And we look forward to interviewing you after your next article. So thank you and goodbye.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.